They came for a night of laughter, wine, and friendship. But by sunrise, every chair at the table sat empty. What began as an innocent dinner party turned into a nightmare so twisted, the truth still makes investigators shudder. She set the table with care. Beef Wellington perfectly golden, candles casting a warm glow, the scent of herbs and buttery pastry drifting through the room. It was the kind of meal that should have brought comfort and laughter, a family lunch, a chance to reconnect. But hidden inside that golden crust was something so deadly that within days, 3 people would be gone, and the 4th would be fighting for his life. This wasn't a tragic kitchen mishap. This was murder, plated and served with a smile. It was July 29th, 2023, in the quiet rural town of Leongatha, Victoria, Australia. Life here was slow. Neighbors waved at each other on morning walks, and most people left their doors unlocked. Erin Patterson, 48, lived in this calm corner of the world, a mother of 2, recently separated from her husband, Simon Patterson. That Saturday, she opened her home for what seemed like an ordinary family gathering. The guests, her former in-laws, Don and Gail Patterson, Gail's sister, Heather Wilkinson, and Heather's husband, Ian Wilkinson. 4 people Erin had known for years, people who trusted her enough to accept a home-cooked meal without a second thought. The centerpiece was a lavish beef Wellington, tender beef fillet, wrapped in prosciutto, duxelles of finely chopped mushrooms, and puff pastry. But the mushrooms inside weren't just any mushrooms. They were Amanita phalloides, death-cap mushrooms, one of the most poisonous fungi in the world. A single cap can kill an adult. Once ingested, amatoxin begins destroying the liver and kidneys. Symptoms: nausea, vomiting, diarrhea often don't appear for 6 to 12 hours, by which time the damage is already underway. The toxins are heat-stable, so cooking doesn't neutralize them. The survival rate without a liver transplant is grim. Erin would later claim she bought the mushrooms from an Asian grocery store in Melbourne. But her story shifted with every retelling. At one point, she said she had also eaten the meal but scraped off the mushrooms. Another time, she said she became mildly ill but recovered quickly. None of it explained why her guests collapsed in agony while she was well enough to drive herself to the hospital and discharge herself against medical advice the very next day. That evening, the first signs emerged. Gail, Don, Heather, and Ian began to feel violently unwell. Stomach cramps, vomiting, severe diarrhea. By the next morning, all 4 were in the hospital. Their conditions worsened rapidly. Heather and Gail died first, just days after the lunch. Don fought for his life, receiving a liver transplant. But it wasn't enough. He passed away soon after. Ian Wilkinson's case was different. A local Baptist pastor, he endured weeks in a medically induced coma, underwent a liver transplant, and spent over 50 days in the hospital. Against the odds, he survived, but his recovery was slow and painful, marked by organ complications and physical weakness. From the start, doctors suspected mushroom poisoning. They notified police, triggering a joint investigation between local officers and Victoria's homicide squad. Detectives began piecing together the last hours before the lunch. How had Erin prepared the meal? Where had the mushrooms come from? And why had she invited her estranged in-laws, but not her ex-husband Simon, who later claimed he avoided the lunch because he feared she might try to poison him again? Then came the first major breakthrough. Security footage showed Erin at a rubbish transfer station, calmly disposing of a food dehydrator. When police recovered it, they found traces of death-cap mushrooms inside, along with her fingerprints. Erin initially denied owning it, When confronted with the footage, she claimed she had panicked because she feared losing custody of her children if it was connected to the poisoning. To investigators, it looked more like she was destroying crucial evidence. Further searches of her home uncovered a second mobile phone that appeared to have been factory reset. Police believed this was an attempt to hide digital communications or online searches related to mushroom toxicity. Investigators also learned Erin had told different people different versions of events, changing details about where the mushrooms came from, how they were prepared, and how much she had eaten herself. Every inconsistency tightened the net around her. By the time Erin was charged, the story had become front-page news across Australia. The media dubbed it the Mushroom Murders. Reporters camped outside the Leongatha courthouse, and experts in toxicology were brought on television to explain how death caps work, how difficult they are to identify, and how rare such poisonings are in the country. Public curiosity turned to outrage as more details emerged, not just about the lunch, but about Erin's past. Her estranged husband, Simon Patterson, alleged a disturbing pattern of events. He claimed there had been multiple occasions in the past when Erin had prepared meals for him that left him dangerously ill. In one instance, he fell into a coma for 16 days and required multiple surgeries. These allegations were kept from the jury during the trial due to evidentiary rules, but they came to light after the verdict. To the public, it suggested the lunch may have been the final step in a long history of attempted poisonings. The trial lasted 10 weeks and was as much about character as it was about evidence. The prosecution painted Erin as a calculating woman who knew exactly what she was doing. They presented forensic evidence showing death cap toxins on the plates, in the dehydrator, and in the remains of the beef Wellington. They noted her lies about the dehydrator, her self-discharge from hospital, and her disposal of potentially incriminating items. They argued that her story about an accidental mix-up was implausible, especially since death caps are distinctive to anyone familiar with mushroom foraging, with their greenish caps and white gills. The defense argued it was all a tragic misunderstanding. Erin loved her guests, they said, and had no reason to harm them. The mushrooms came from a store, not a forest. She had eaten some herself and had no idea they were dangerous. But the jury didn't believe it. On July 7th, 2025, Erin Patterson was convicted of 3 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder. Her sentencing is scheduled for August 25th, and she faces the possibility of spending the rest of her life in prison. Yet the case leaves haunting questions. Why would she do it? There was no clear financial motive. Theories range from resentment toward her in-laws to revenge against her estranged husband to a psychological compulsion. No confession has ever been made, and Erin maintains her innocence to this day. But the physical evidence tells its own story, one written in toxins, lies, and the silence of those who can no longer speak. For Ian Wilkinson, survival came at a cost. In interviews after leaving the hospital, he spoke of the grief of losing his wife and friends, the shock of learning how close he came to joining them, and the daily physical struggles he still faces. His ordeal became a symbol of endurance in a case otherwise defined by death. Yet even his testimony could not reveal the full horror of those hours after the lunch, when every guest was unknowingly digesting a lethal dose of poison. The psychological impact on the community has been profound. Leongatha is no longer just a quiet town. It's the setting of one of Australia's most infamous murder cases. For many, the idea that such evil could be carried out in a kitchen under the guise of hospitality is the most disturbing element of all. We trust those who cook for us. We trust family. And in this case, that trust was shattered. The lesson is unsettling. Danger can come from the most familiar faces, wrapped in the warmth of tradition and the comfort of home. Erin Patterson's story is a reminder that some of the darkest crimes don't happen in the shadows. They happen in broad daylight, around the dining table, with wine glasses full and laughter in the air. On that cold Saturday in July 2023, 4 people sat down to share a meal. By the end of the week, 3 were gone. The lone survivor carries the memories and the pain. Erin Patterson now sits in a prison cell, awaiting her fate. And somewhere in the echoes of that small-town kitchen, the clink of cutlery still lingers, a sound that will forever be tied to one of the most chilling betrayals in recent history. Because trust, once broken in such a way, never truly returns. And next time someone invites you to dinner, you might find yourself thinking not just about the food, but about the hands that prepared it. As investigators pieced together the horrifying puzzle, they found signs that suggested the entire event had been meticulously premeditated. The dining table was perfectly set, the wine glasses placed with precision, and the kitchen counter bore traces of ingredients that had been deliberately laced with a deadly toxin. Even the choice of wine seemed strategic, masking the bitter taste of poison. Detectives couldn't shake the thought that this wasn't a crime of passion, but a cold, calculated act of malice, planned days, perhaps weeks, in advance. Forensic experts worked tirelessly, running tests on every scrap of food and every drop of liquid they could find. It didn't take long for the truth to emerge. The toxin used was rare, almost impossible to acquire without connections in the criminal underworld. This pointed to a deeper, darker side of the host's life, one that his friends had likely never known about. The revelation sent chills through the entire community, especially among those who had once dined with him and now wondered if they too had narrowly escaped the same fate. Meanwhile, police delved into the host's personal life, uncovering a string of financial disputes, broken relationships, and grudges that stretched back years. One by one, people from his past came forward, each with their own unsettling encounters, subtle threats, cryptic messages, and sudden bursts of unexplained anger. It became clear that this dinner party was not just a random act of violence, but the culmination of a long-brewing storm of resentment. As the investigation deepened, neighbors recalled odd behavior in the days leading up to the dinner. Some reported seeing the host carrying heavy boxes into his home late at night, while others noticed that his usually cheerful demeanor had been replaced by an eerie, almost detached calm. The most unsettling account came from a delivery driver who claimed the host had ordered industrial-grade cleaning supplies, items no ordinary dinner host would need. These details only added to the haunting mystery of what truly happened that night. In the end, what began as a warm invitation to share a meal turned into one of the darkest chapters in recent memory. Friends who walked in with laughter and trust never walked out again. This story isn't just about a crime. It's about betrayal at the most personal level, the kind that turns a dinner table into a crime scene and memories into nightmares. It forces us to ask, how well do we really know the people we let into our lives? Evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it greets you at the door with a smile and asks how you like your wine. And that is perhaps the most terrifying truth of all.